it's Alice, and today we're gonna do a spring TBR. Now, I'm not gonna lie, it is not very spring-like here in Oslo just yet. We just had a huge amount of snow come in the last couple of days, but it appears to be melting quite quickly, despite the fact that it's a very gloomy day outside today. And hopefully, that's the last snowfall of the season, and we're done with winter. I am very ready for spring, so hopefully it's just around the corner. March is a funny month though, and it's kind of like a trickster because at least here we'll have days when it's like relatively warm outside and it feels like the beginning of spring, and then it'll just be like full on winter again, and then one of those days will appear again. And you never quite know when it's the real deal or not, but I hope that it is now, or at least very, very soon. I'm a little bit tired of like trekking around in the snow because it's lovely, but like snow in the city, not great. Anyways, let's get into the TBR. I've just had like a peruse of my shelves, and I've just picked out the books that I think appear the most interesting right now. Doing TBRs is always funny to me because I'm very much a mood reader, and so the books that I pick for TBRs are based on the mood that I'm in that day, and then that might not last, but this is what I think right now that I want to read over the next couple of months. The first two are actually both mythology retellings, and the first one is Ariadne by Jennifer Saint. This tells the story of a princess of Crete named Ariadne who grows up in this palace, and she's the daughter of this fearsome king, but beneath the palace her brother is kept, like in the basement, I guess, because he's a minotaur and he's really dangerous, and their father is really ashamed of him. And it says something about how he demands, like the minotaur demands a blood sacrifice every year, and I think the story starts off with someone arriving to be the sacrifice to this creature, and Ariadne wants to save him because she falls in love with him. So she kind of gets caught between her family and the man she loves, and I'm not super familiar with the original myth, but I am familiar with the basics of it, and if this follows most of that, I think there's some heartbreak in store for our main character. But I usually really enjoy books like these. I really like mythology retellings, and it's been a while since I've read one, and I have a lot of them on my shelves, so I just need to start reading them again. I also really like the fact that a lot of these books retell these myths from the perspective of a woman. I think that's really cool, and the next book that I have kind of does the same thing. It's 1,000 Ships by Natalie Haynes, and this retells like the myth of the Trojan War, but from the perspective of several women, I think. I don't quite know who these women are, but I know that there are several of them, and I think that sounds really great. I've had this book for a while, and the thing that reminded me that I need to read this is that Natalie Haynes' other book that I can't remember the name of, I think maybe it's like Stone Blind or something. That book is on the Women's Prize for Fiction long list this year, and I really want to read that book, but because I have this, I feel like I need to read this first, and I still also just really want to read it, so when I read this, I can get that other book and then read that, and it's all gonna be great. Then we've got a book that I'm sure is just gonna be a great time. It's The Mummy Case by Elizabeth Peters. This is the third book in the Amelia Peabody series, and in the first book we meet our main character named Amelia in the 1880s, I'm pretty sure, and she has just inherited this fortune from her father, and in the first book she sets off to see the world. Lots and lots of things have happened since the first book, and in this one, I'm pretty sure we meet Amelia and her husband as they are in Egypt, and the story starts off in Cairo, where our main character overhears this like kind of shady conversation between a shop owner and some stranger, and then I think the shop owner turns up dead, and there's like a stolen mummy, and who knows what else is gonna happen, but I'm sure it's gonna be a fun time, just like these books always are. One of the reasons I really like the series is that I love our main character. I love books that deal with like archaeology and stuff like that, and it's like an adventure book, but also just because these books are a perfect break when you just don't want to think and you just want to read something that's Fun. Next, we've got more historical fiction with The Paris Library by Janet Charles, which is based on the true story of the heroic librarians of the American Library in Paris during the Second World War, which sounds really cool. We follow one woman in Paris in 1939, and she has everything she could ever dream of, but then the Nazis march into Paris and she stands to lose everything. We also follow this lonely teenage girl in Montana in the 80s, I believe, and she lives in the small town and she's looking for adventure, and her interest is piqued by this solitary elderly neighbor. You can kind of assume that these two stories have some sort of connection, and I used to read loads of these types of books, and then I just get caught up reading a lot of other stuff, but I really like these kinds of stories every once in a while, and it's been a while since I've read one, so I'm excited to give this a go, and I've heard a lot of good things about this, so I have pretty high expectations. Then we've got a book set in medieval times called A Morbid Taste for Bones by Ellis Peters, which was recommended to me by one of you, and the thing that piqued my interest with this one is that it's about a mystery-solving monk, which you know that's gotta be good. In this first book, our main character goes to Wales, I think, to retrieve these sacred remains for the church, I guess. But the townspeople where he's getting these remains, they're sort of divided as to how they feel about the fact that he's there and he's getting these bones, I guess. And then I think someone is murdered and our brother gets caught up in trying to solve the mystery of that murder. I am very intrigued to see how I feel about this. I wonder what the tone is going to be like, because I think it can go several ways and I'm intrigued to see what it's like. I also just haven't read a lot of books set in medieval times, so that's really cool as well. Next up, we have got Kindred by Octavia E. Butler, which is a book I have mentioned several times in several TBRs, and I've had it for a while and I still haven't read it, and I really just need to. The thing with this book is that it's one of those where I just am so sure that I'm going to like it that I don't feel any rush to get to it because I think it's going to be great. And I know that that's a thing a lot of people do, and I do it all the time. But the thing is also, with those books, whenever I do get around to reading them, I always kind of regret not reading them sooner because they are so good. So I really just need to read this one. It starts off in California in 1976, I think, and our main character has just turned 26, and she is somehow pulled through time, back in time, so it is a little bit science fiction-y, but I think the time travel is the only science fiction part of this. She's pulled through time and she saves this boy's life, and that puts her life in danger, and just before she is about to die, I think, she's pulled back to her present day, and then she keeps being pulled back in time. I don't know, but it sounds fantastic, and I really want to read something by this author. I think it's going to be fantastic, and I just really need to read this. I think this is the first science fiction book that was published by a Black person, which is really cool, and it says that it's a masterpiece, and I can't wait to read it. I really just need to. Then I think it's time to read another book by Isabel Allende. I've got this one called Daughter of Fortune, and in here we follow this girl who was orphaned at birth, and she is raised by a sister and a brother, I think, in a British colony in Chile, and I guess we just follow her life. I think she falls in love with this kind of sketchy guy, and just as the California gold rush is starting, he wants to go there to find wealth, and I think she ends up following him, but then she can't find him, I think, and we just see how all of that goes. I really love how Allende writes these kinds of stories. I've read several books by her where we follow the same characters throughout their lives, and I love how she writes characters. I always feel sadness when I finish her books that are like that, because you feel so connected to the character that it's hard to let them go, and hopefully this will be like that as well. I think it's gonna be great. I also think this is translated. I know she's written some of her books in English. This one also has a map, by the way, but I'm pretty sure this is one of her translated ones. The next two books that I have are cozy mysteries, and the first one is A Spoonful of Murder by J.M. Hall. And to be totally honest with you, I don't have super high hopes for this. I remember I got it in a bookstore in London where it was just like, there was a table of cozy mysteries, and I just thought it sounded delightful, so I got it. I think it's gonna be one of those books that's just like a fun time, and it doesn't need to be that deep. It follows 3 retired school teachers who every Thursday they meet up to like drink tea and eat cake, I think, and they somehow end up involved in a murder of someone they know or knew, I think. It just sounds like a good time. It sounds like the kind of book where I can just get a cup of tea and maybe a slice of cake and read this and enjoy it. The other one is Death by Dumpling by Vivian Chen, which is again a book I've had for a long time and I still haven't read it. The story is about this woman who, after a horrible breakup, I think she moves back in with her parents and she starts working at the family restaurant. Even though she'd promised herself to never go back there, she goes there, and I think the mystery is that like the property manager of this restaurant dies after having food delivered from the restaurant, which is, to be fair, a little suspicious. Again, I just think this is gonna be a good time, and I really hope I like this first book so I can keep going with the series, because all of the titles of the books just really make me chuckle and it makes me want to read them. And, you know, maybe these books are a little cheesy, but I'm sure they're gonna be fun. Lastly, we have this graphic novel, which is called Squire, and the story is about this young girl who has always dreamed of becoming a knight of this once great empire that she lives in. She's from a subjugated group and they don't have full citizenship, and the only way to get full citizenship is to become a knight. And I think that's one of the reasons she wants to do it. And then it appears that war is about to break out, and this allows her to sign up and follow her dream. It appears though that maybe it wasn't quite what she had imagined, which ain't that just the way? And I think she ends up having to like hide her background and stuff to survive. And obviously war is not great. And I think we just follow her story. I love a good standalone graphic novel. Like I really look for these as much as I can. I really like when they're not in a series. I think the art looks really good in here. I like the color palette, and I think this is gonna break my heart, but I still want to read it. That was the last book though, so that was the entire stack of books that I had to show you today. I'd love to know if any of you have made a spring TBR yet. Maybe it's a little bit soon, but if you've made one, I would love to know what's on there. I would also love to know if you've read any of the books that I mentioned and what you thought. And as always, thank you very much for hanging out with me today, and I will see you soon.